Thank you for joining me here today. I'm here today, along with my colleagues, because we want to replace school property taxes. So, what would you be willing to pay to completely replace, once and for all, the school property tax? For those of you who don't know me, I'm State Representative Jim Cox. As I've talked to people in my district and all around the Commonwealth in different places that I've visited and been asked to speak to, I've asked them the common question: what would you be willing to pay to replace your school property taxes? My colleagues here in the legislature have joined me today to propose an answer to that question. What would you say if I told you that the answer to the school property tax problem is here in my hand? For those of you who may not be able to see it, this is just a penny, 1 cent. You frequently see them on the ground in parking lots. Sometimes you find them between your couch cushions when you're looking for your remote. Sometimes you see them at stores where they have a little dish with pennies in them. Need a penny, take a penny, have a penny, leave a penny. You've all seen the signs, maybe taking advantage of somebody else's generosity and leaving a penny behind to help pay a penny or two that you were missing. Chances are, if you drop a penny on your kitchen floor and it rolls underneath your refrigerator, pretty sure you're not going to remove that refrigerator to get to that penny. In the scheme of things, the penny is a pretty small thing. And yet, this is what it would take to fully replace school property taxes, once and for all. This is what stands between Pennsylvanians and the ability to completely eliminate their school property taxes and the ability to own their own homes. And this is the basis and the concept behind the Property Tax Independence Act. Allow me to explain. We know that in order to replace school property taxes, we're going to have to come up with something to replace the revenue. The Property Tax Independence Act would raise the sales tax by 1%. That is literally one of these for every dollar that you spend. That means when you go to the dollar store, at least the dollar stores that sell things for $1 and not $3 and $4, but when you go to the dollar store and you make that purchase, you'll have to give the cashier an additional one of these. In return, your school property tax bill would disappear once and for all. For those of you who can't see the penny, I'm going to put this in a simple chart. This is the sales tax. For every 100 pennies that you now hand to a cashier, we're asking for one additional penny. Seems pretty small in the scheme of things, doesn't it? Likewise, for those with jobs, it would cost an additional one of these, actually 1.27 of these. I didn't want to break the law by cutting up a penny, so that's why I've got another chart here. But it'll cost 1.27% in addition to what you're paying now. And so again, as you look at what we're talking about here, for every dollar that you make, you'll now be asked to pay an additional 1.27 cents. And you're not getting nothing for it. Your school property taxes will be completely removed. Now, we also, in order to make up the revenue, we're closing some special interest loopholes in the existing sales and use tax system. For example, when I go to the store to buy one of my personal favorites, M&Ms, currently not taxable under Pennsylvania law, I'd have to, instead of paying $1 for that bag of M&Ms, I'd pay $1.07. Now, as much as that pains me, I know that my school property taxes would be eliminated, and so, like others, I'm willing to do that. Now, I know there are some people in the building who are already saying, oh, here we go again. It's not going to be able to get done. We can't do this. Others are saying the numbers aren't going to add up. Others are saying it's not going to make it out of the House, let alone to the governor's desk. Well, I personally find it very difficult to believe that a penny could stand in between Pennsylvanians and the ability to truly own their homes, and that one of these, a penny, will keep them from having their legislators do what needs to be done to eliminate their school property taxes. So my question is this: are the legislators who oppose this plan willing to go back to their homeowners and their constituents and say that this is the reason they couldn't get behind the school property tax replacement effort that we have here today, that we're calling the Property Tax Independence Act? I'm here today because I want to eliminate school property taxes and replace them with a solid, sustainable source of revenue. But as you can see, there are people behind me from both the House and the Senate. You're going to hear from Senator Dave Argall in a few moments. He represents the Senate prime sponsor of Senate Bill 76. I'm the prime sponsor for House Bill 76, and behind me are just a handful of the co-sponsors of these pieces of legislation. We've put together a map here, and what you see on the map are the counties represented by these individuals and those who couldn't join us today for other reasons. There are a few committee meetings going on and so forth. But as you look at the map, most of the population base in Pennsylvania is covered. We've got some areas that are not covered, and what you'll find is there's a reason that they don't support this. We don't expect everyone to support it, but I wanted everyone here today to see the broad range of support that we have on the stage and in all of the co-sponsors that we have on this legislation. In the House today, we'll be introducing with myself plus 59 other members of the House. My most recent tally of the Senate, and Senator Argall can correct me if I'm not up to date. Last I knew, we had 13 co-sponsors in the Senate. For each of those chambers, that is a sizable level of support. And as I mentioned, they come from all areas of the state. At this time, I would like to invite Senator Argall up to talk about Senate Bill 76 and why it's important that we get this job done.
As you can tell from Representative Cox's presentation, as we get ready to formally introduce Senate Bill 76 and House Bill 76, this is not a Republican idea. This is not a Democratic idea. This is a Pennsylvania taxpayer issue. I really want to applaud Representative Cox for his leadership. He and David Baldinger, I think, are the main reasons that we have brought this concept this far today. And this is not, of course, a new issue, but it is certainly the #1 issue in the 6 counties that I represent, from Pine Grove all the way up to the Pocono racetrack. And so we're here today, Republicans, Democrats, and most importantly, taxpayers, to say that the time has come that this outmoded, archaic, unfair system has to be eliminated. We've been dealing with this system since the 1830s. Governor Corbett, in his 2011 budget address, noted that over 200 years ago, a group of English poets discussed the idea of building a utopian society on the banks of the Susquehanna, but they never made it, and he guessed that they had probably heard about our property taxes. And I'm here to tell you, they haven't gotten any better since then. It is definitely the most universally hated tax that you will find in Pennsylvania. Some of you have heard me say in the past that in 1868, when my great-great-great-grandfather became an American citizen standing on the steps of the Schuylkill County Courthouse, we were still stuck with this unfair system. We were stuck with this system when students were still counting with the abacus. I challenge any of my colleagues or anyone in the audience today to try to figure out how an abacus works. We've moved on, but we're still stuck with this same stupid, archaic system. I've told my constituents that in the 1920s I had a grandfather who was paid as a school teacher partially in vegetables. We don't pay our school employees, our janitors, our district employees, our teachers in vegetables anymore. But we're still stuck with this same unfair system. What we're trying to do today is to give the taxpayers a better way to fund our public schools. Last year, Senator Schwenk had suggested that we take the bill and ask for an in-depth analysis from the Independent Fiscal Office. And I think for the very first time, we now have an independent verification that the numbers simply do add up. This is revenue neutral legislation. We have the facts to prove it. A dollar for dollar match to fund our public schools. And so I'm glad to stand up here today with my colleagues to note that the fight continues. Along with Representative Cox leading the battle in the House, in the Senate, Mike Fulmer, Senator Schwenk, Senator Udicak, and I have asked every member of the Senate to sign on to the bill. And we're now in the process of sitting down with every single senator asking for that yes vote. And so that, along with the 76 taxpayer groups led by David Baldinger from across the state, I hope that this is the year we can finally do this, because when we talk to those 76 groups, we make it very clear this is their bill, which we are offering at their request. And so as many of you have asked me, this is our goal. Hopefully this is the year we put the stake through the heart of the beast once and for all.
And as Senator Argall mentioned, we're not just talking about this being a bipartisan approach. It is truly a bipartisan approach. As we worked through the different versions of this and the changes that were made, I took suggestions from both sides of the aisle and we incorporated it into the legislation. One of the Democrats in the House who's sponsoring this bill is Tina Davis. And at this time, I'd like to ask her to come to the podium to talk about the bill.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Representative Cox for bringing this issue up in the media again. I learned a long time ago that I write these speeches all the time and then I never use them, so I'm going to talk to you from my heart today. I come from a district, consolidated district, where there's a big retirement community. My background, I've been a realtor for 22 years, so putting people in their homes has always been my pride and joy. Back in '08 when the economy hit, I was on local government, spoke everywhere to beg people to help me with people staying in their homes. And I'm just so proud to be a co-sponsor of this bill. I know it's going to take a while. A lot of stakeholders are involved in this to get this through, but I'm committed to Representative Cox. I've already offered to have a hearing in my district, and you'll see a lot of people come out for that. So thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask another member of the Senate, Senator Judy Schwenk, to come and speak to the bill.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Judy Schwenk, and I represent the 11th Senatorial District. And I can tell you, there is no other issue that stimulates more constituent calls and pleas for help. And it takes just that one moment where you're meeting with a constituent, you're looking at them eye to eye, and you truly understand the issues that they're facing, paying their property taxes, particularly elderly folks. Our goal is to keep people in their homes as long as we possibly can, so that they can live full lives. The property tax is making that impossible to fulfill that goal. And that is so important to the future of Pennsylvania, but it's not just about seniors. It's about young people who also want to buy homes. We've learned from the Independent Fiscal Office report that this legislation will actually stimulate home sales and help revitalize certainly areas of Pennsylvania, particularly our cities, that really could use this kind of relief. I see this legislation as a win-win, but we have work to do. And all of you that are sitting out there really need to be sure that you'll contact your legislators and have a serious talk with them, encouraging them to sign on to this bill. We've formed a caucus in the Senate, and I want you to know we have 18 members, actually, including myself, as part of that caucus. And it's bipartisan, 9 Democrats, 9 Republicans. That should give us great encouragement. Let's keep up the work. Thank you.
As you can imagine, as I was putting together a list of people who would be speaking today, try to find a balance of different people from different areas and so forth, Some members came up to me and said, look, I really, really would like to speak on this. I really would like to say something here. I hear about this every day, practically every other email. And the next individual, Representative David Maloney, is one of those such individuals who hears about this on a daily basis. I can't say that he hears about it more than every other person on the stage today, because people who are behind me today, they hear about it, as Senator Schwenk so aptly put it. They hear about it. They look across the desk at people. They look in the eyes of the people, and they are people who are searching for a solution, people who are searching for relief. And so at this time, I'd like to invite Representative David Maloney to share his side of the story.
Thank you all for being here. This is something that Jim pretty much took the thunder away, and rightly so. It has been and continues to be an almost daily conversation for me in a plethora of different reasons. I did serve on my school board locally. I do understand some of the complexities of this. But having said that, you know, the way we fund schools in Pennsylvania is a problem. It's a problem that's been talked about here in the General Assembly for over 3 decades. But it is a problem that is now growing around the state, as that map shows, and I don't think it can be any longer ignored. The governor himself identified this issue as the elephant in the room. We are spending more money on education than we ever had before, but it should not be on the backs of homeowners. I am not here today to rehash and repeat the things that you have heard or will hear, even about the horrors of those people who are losing their homes, which I do get visited almost on a weekly basis in my district. But I am here to say that I believe HB 76 would restore real home ownership to Pennsylvanians and fund our schools. Thank you.
Before I invite our next speaker to the podium, I'd like to provide a little more background on this legislation. For those of you who've not followed this since its inception, this is not the first time this type of proposal has been put in front of the Pennsylvania legislature. Since 2003, various renditions of this proposals have been floated, studied, scrutinized, analyzed, and discussed at length in town halls, pool halls, and just about every other imaginable venue. These proposals have been embodied in legislation up to 220 pages long. Last session, when we introduced House Bill 1776 and Senate Bill 1400, we had whittled the bill down to 170 pages. As we progressed through last session, we continued to fine-tune the legislation, working with members on both sides of the aisles to address their concerns and resolve issues that were brought to our attention. We also asked the House Appropriations Committee to perform a fiscal analysis of the bill in order to assist us in our revenue estimates. And as Senator Argall mentioned earlier, at the recommendation of Senator Schwenk, we put the bill in front of the Independent Fiscal Office and asked for a comprehensive study of the economic impact of the bill, along with the review of the revenue sources and our proposed solution. The results of this study told us what we already knew, that with the right numbers, our proposal could work to the benefit of all Pennsylvanians. House Bill 76 and Senate Bill 76 is now only 137 pages long. We've continued to streamline it, and these pieces of legislation reflect that streamlined approach to a problem that has plagued the Pennsylvania taxpayer for far too long. In following the information and recommendations included in the IFO report, we were able to adapt the legislation, making it fiscally sound, and as Senator Argall said, we now know for certain that it does add up. The most notable change is that we have a slight increase in the personal income tax over the previous version of the legislation, because that was what was needed to make the proposal revenue neutral. Along with the analysis of the revenue levels, the IFO also studied the economic impact. At this point, we're going to hear from Mr. David Baldinger. I'll let him introduce himself with a little bit of his background, but Mr. Baldinger is here at my request because he was integral to the formation of this legislation. We peeled apart every previous version of the legislation and we put it back together piece by piece, making sure we only included what was needed to accomplish our goal. And it would not be possible without Mr. Baldinger today. We wouldn't be here, because I might have thrown up my hands and said, this is just way too complicated, it's too much of a mess. But working with Mr. Baldinger, we sat down and we worked piece by piece through this, and through his efforts and the taxpayer groups he represents, we are now standing here today. So I'd like to welcome David Baldinger.
Good afternoon. My name is David Baldinger, and I'm here today to represent the PCTA, the Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayer Associations, a grassroots affiliation of 76 local taxpayer advocacy groups that spans the Commonwealth. Our public education system is irreparably broken. As Senator Argall stated earlier, it is an antiquated system. It is no longer capable of fairly funding schools, imposes a subjective tax that has no relationship to a person's ability to pay, and is totally out of sync with 21st century economic reality. The PCTA supports the Property Tax Independence Act because it will remove an oppressive burden from hundreds of thousands of Pennsylvanians who are struggling to keep their homes in the face of relentlessly increasing school property taxes. But besides the needs of taxpayers, the requirements for educating our children also must be considered. House Bill and Senate Bill 76 have been designed to supply a reliable source of school district funding. Many school districts statewide are experiencing financial difficulties and sharp revenue declines caused by assessment appeals and a rapidly shrinking property tax base. The Property Tax Independence Act stabilizes school finances with a predictable revenue stream, continues to fund all Pennsylvania school districts at their current levels, and does not interfere in any way with local spending decisions. But beyond that, there's many other benefits from the enactment of the Property Tax Independence Act that may not be immediately obvious, but were clearly defined in the Independent Fiscal Office analysis of the legislation that was released on September 25th. The report stated that the elimination of school property taxes increases the disposable income of both residential and business property taxpayers, and assumes that these taxpayers will spend 90% of that income increase, greatly stimulating Pennsylvania's economy. The analysis indicates that House Bill and Senate Bill 76 will cause home values to increase, on average, by more than 10% statewide, restoring a large amount of the equity that was lost during homeowners during the 2008 housing downturn. Working-age homeowners realize a tax cut. The analysis found that the increase in federal income tax, state income tax, and sales tax is more than offset by the reduction in property taxes. Retired homeowners also realize a significant reduction in taxes. The analysis found that the property tax reduction easily offsets any increase from the higher sales tax. The report also said that benefits would accrue to home builders, home developers, and other landowners who convert current land holdings into new housing plots, increasing employment in the construction sector. And the report also stated that the elimination of property taxes would clearly increase the attractiveness of the Commonwealth for business location and expansion, which in turn would generate more jobs for Pennsylvanians. Now, besides the many House Bill and Senate Bill benefits to Pennsylvania that I've just outlined, there is one primary reason for the unwavering support of the Property Tax Independence Act by the Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayer Associations, and Representative Cox alluded to that. It is the people's legislation. From the very earliest discussions in 2010, the crafting of the Property Tax Independence Act has been an equal collaboration between lawmakers and the PCTA grassroots activists who are working for the enactment of this legislation. Due to the consideration and cooperation of the prime sponsors of House Bill and Senate Bill 76, we have been privileged to be a full partner in the legislative process, and we thank those who have given us the opportunity to help draft such vital legislation. This collaboration is unique in many ways. First, the Property Tax Independence Act belongs to the people. It is our legislation in a state that does not allow for citizen initiative and referendum, and we are extremely proud of being co-owners of this bill. Further, the PCTA is comprised of supporters from across the entire political spectrum. We, as ordinary citizens, have accomplished what politicians in both Washington and Harrisburg have struggled to achieve with only limited success: to work together across party lines and without ideological posturing to reach a sensible and effective solution to a critical problem. Through this open, transparent process, the legislation has gained the fervent and enthusiastic support of taxpayers from across the Commonwealth. As you can see from the bill's many co-sponsors and from the representatives and senators present on this podium today, the Property Tax Independence Act, through its balanced, nonpartisan approach, has gained many lawmaker proponents from both sides of the aisle, reflecting the same diversity as the citizens who helped to craft this legislation. We greatly appreciate the support offered by these lawmakers and thank them for their efforts. The Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayer Associations is grateful to be a participant in this process. It is time for the General Assembly to listen to the voice of Pennsylvania's citizens. Today, the PCTA strongly urges the leaders and members of the General Assembly to do what is right for the people of Pennsylvania and move the Property Tax Independence Act forward as expeditiously as possible.
As you've heard today, this bill is supported not just by members of the House and Senate, but it is supported by the taxpayers of Pennsylvania. I dare say there are members who are not on this stage today. I dare say there are members who are not co-sponsors of the legislation yet, who consistently hear about this issue as the #1 issue in their district. Regardless of where you go, somebody is being affected by the school property tax. I'm not going to rehash everything that was said today, but I want to touch on something. I alluded to it earlier that people are going to already start saying, what's different about this? Why should we do it now? This issue is not dying. In fact, something that Mr. Baldinger did not mention, because he's way too modest, is that only 2 years ago, when we began this discussion in January of 2011, his coalition consisted of 37 taxpayer groups. And if you listened a moment ago, he described 76 taxpayer groups. Now, I do find it quite convenient that we have 76 and the bill number is 76. But trust me, we are working to find other taxpayer groups that we may not have learned about who are in support of this and who are continuing to contact us, finding out more about the legislation. I would ask everyone here today, take a close look at this. It looks similar, and there's only so many ways to fund a property tax replacement. But when you've got this level of support across the state from legislators and a level of support from constituents that backs that, how can you let a penny stand in the way of getting the job done? Thank you. I'm not going to hog the microphone. I would actually ask that if there are members of the media that would like to speak with any of the members up here, please talk to them on the way out. If we have a general question, I'd be willing to answer that. But if you'd like to speak with individual members, I know they'll make themselves available for comment. Yes, sir.
This passes, there's no leaders on the stage there.
I'm sorry, could you repeat
There's
that?
no leaders on the stage. What's the feeling among leadership of this proposal?
Actually, Mike Verb stands behind me. Representative Stan Saylor he was back there a moment ago. I know he had to run to something else. Both of them are co-sponsors of the legislation. If you look at comments made by individuals like Dave Reed, comments made in their local town halls, they say, hey, we need to replace the school property tax, and they talk about using the sales and the income tax. So on some of those issues, I think we're just a matter of perhaps making the request to them to see if they're co-sponsors. And as you know, there are politics involved in which leaders are on and what they get behind. So we do have 2 already on, and we're working for others. Thank you.
How much revenue will the legislation actually generate? I mean, you said it's revenue neutral, but just
Right.
dollar amount.
What we're looking to replace is $10.4 billion in school property taxes. The total load for school property taxes is $12.7 billion. However, when you remove the $2.3 billion that is embodied by existing school debt, which we are not looking to replace, when we remove that, it brings it down to $10.4 billion that needs to be replaced. Yes, sir.
Representative, what's the what's standing in the way of this? If it makes sense to you and all these lawmakers and me and these people and David, what's in the way then? Help me understand that.
This is what stands. That's what stands in the way. If you look at that map, it looks a lot like the census maps you would have been looking at a couple years ago, as we saw the drain of population going from the western and northern tier down into those other sections. And with that population drain, you have an increasing load on our districts, those of us who are in those green zones. Our districts are receiving more students, more taxpayers, and in theory, that's a good thing. You've got more taxpayers, but as school districts will tell you, when you've got students that come in and they've got to build a new classroom building, they've got to hire more teachers, there are costs associated with that. What has happened is the funding that should have followed those students into our districts remains locked in. We've got a larger funding problem that needs to be addressed. This bill does not go about addressing that, but what it does is it makes it a more equitable approach that says if school property taxes are being paid, we're going to replace them with this, and this allows us for the first time to drive the revenue back from the state, get school boards out of the business of raising revenue, and get them back to the business of looking at the revenue they have available and how to best utilize it. We do have other work to be done on the funding formula, but those you see who are not yet in the green zone, they're benefiting from the current structure. More often than not, they're receiving quite a bit of money from funding sources outside the school property taxes. The funding formula we have now is feeding their districts at such a level they don't have to increase their property taxes because they're getting funding for students that they no longer have. And again, that's another subject for another day, but the funding formula is what has led to the property tax issue being a problem in these areas where we can't keep up with it. The funding formula is not helping us as much as it should, so we've got to raise our local property taxes to foot the bill for all the students.
The thing that gets so many people excited about this is your argument that more people will be paying so that more people end up paying less than the few who are saddled, some say, with paying for the way schools are funded, and just because I'm a reporter I have to put that qualifier in there. But so is that the strongest crux of your argument, is that this is a better way to do it, period?
Absolutely. When I campaigned on this, and I know others did some of the same type of thing, when I campaigned on this, I stood on people's doorstep and I explained it like this. I said, you know, you've got a car in your driveway there, and if you and I went over there and attempted to pick up the car, you know, with a series of levers and crowbars or whatever, we might be able to get some bars underneath it and pick it up off the ground for a second. We'd probably break our backs and it would crush us, but we could probably do it. That's the school property tax system. We're relying on a small tax base. We're relying on a tax base that only grows so much, and with the economy the way it has, that base has actually shrunk. As you've seen, you know, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. When we step out to the income tax, it's equivalent to taking me and the other individuals who are on the stage right now and saying, together, we're going to pay for school funding. You take the next step and include sales tax. We then gather everybody in this room, and because it's the sales tax, we gather anyone who was ever in this room at any time the tax was supposed to be collected. So the members who've already left, the people who were standing in the back, they would have contributed toward the education funding. So it's an inherently more fair way to do things because it spreads the burden so much more lightly, everyone can bear it more easily. It's not easy on anyone. Taxes are taxes and everybody hates them. But at the end of the day, when you spread it more thinly, it makes it easier on everyone, enables people to stay in their homes, and it enables us to fund our schools at a level that it needs to be funded at.
The other part that I think resonates very well with people, it's not Senator, a lot of people, it's not like a lot of people haven't tried on this. We've tweaked it, we've adjusted it, but none of those tweaks work. What I think is the strongest portion of this bill is that it eliminates the school district property tax for all time, so it can never come back. I think that's what people understand. The subject can be hopelessly complex, but that part they get.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to that, because your original question was, what is preventing this from coming through? And I think that's right. Part of the answer, I think, is we still got some convincing to do. This is a grassroots effort. The people out there in Pennsylvania want this. I'm thoroughly convinced of that everywhere I go. But we still have legislators coming up and saying, I don't think the people in my district, they haven't mentioned anything about it. I don't think it's a big issue. We have some convincing to do there, and the people have some convincing to do in their districts to get on the phone to their legislators and tell them this is an issue for me, and I want to know where you stand on House Bill 76, and I want to make sure that you're supporting it. This is a big issue, and big issues require bold measures, and this is a bold measure. We have momentum building. We got to keep up the momentum. And every year that this grows, we get a little bit closer to doing it. I still hear naysayers saying, well, it's been tried, and we can't seem to get this through. Yeah, that's true. It has been tried, but we're not done yet. We haven't given up the fight. The people back home won't let us give up the fight. So we're here, standing here today, to continue that fight and encourage people back home to contact everybody they can and keep the fire under their feet. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, what's going to stop this again from dying in committee? If it dies in committee, are we going to do a petition to discharge to get it out of committee and get it to the floor? Let's see who's really behind this and who's not really behind it. It's time the senior citizens of this state get some relief. It's time to get some jobs into the inner city that people want to work, and this will do it very nicely. Thank you.
I appreciate that comment. And that is an example of the type of taxpayer that we, on this stage, interact with on an almost daily basis. For some of us, it is a daily basis. But the problem is a very real problem. We don't know the course that this is going to take. We don't know what the vote's going to look like in the Finance Committee. Obviously, we're going to work with the Finance Committee members to make sure they understand it in both the House and the Senate. Once the legislation is introduced, we'll see where the support begins to fall, and we'll see what the where the opposition might lie, and then that's when the taxpayers will have to make their voice heard. I'll take one last question if I could.
And can you push back against one of the criticisms of that, and that is that if a district has outstanding debt, they'll still be able to collect just to pay that off, and so it's kind of a gradual, it's not a light switch. David hates me for this fact because I pointed out the story once, but can you push back against that criticism, because that is something that people don't like this point to. They say, yeah, but you'll still get a property tax bill for maybe 10 years or something like that. It's a whole lot smaller, right?
Absolutely. I think there's something like 18 school districts that don't have any form of debt service, and so there will be, I think it's 18 that don't have any form of debt service. They'll see property tax elimination on the spot. The average debt service level around the Commonwealth for the remaining school districts is about 10%. That means that by and large, the citizens in the Commonwealth will receive a 90% reduction in their school property taxes once this is implemented. 90%. That's unlike any level of rebate, any level of reform that has ever been done in the House. So if people honestly can stand in front of you or me or any of these individuals behind me and say, I don't want 90% because it'll gradually go down and disappear over 10 years, they're probably going to be committed by their friends and family very shortly after that conversation. But 90% is significant, and you can't ignore it. Now, again, that's the average. There are some with a little more, some with a little less, but 90% is a significant number, and it cannot be ignored.
Short-term gain, long-term gain, right, Rep?
Absolutely. Yeah. There is an immediate short-term gain, and eventually full elimination as the long-term game. I'm going to let Mr. Baldinger conclude here for interest of time, and I'll let him conclude things out. Thank you.
Matt, long-term debt in Pennsylvania is roughly $2.3 billion for all the school districts combined. In order to finance that from the state level, it would have required a much higher personal income tax. First of all, trying to eliminate the $10.4 billion that we're looking at right now was tough enough. To add another $2.3 billion to it would have been next to impossible, and the bill would no longer have been viable. But we've heard complaints with previous versions of the bill that attempted to eliminate the property tax completely from people in frugal districts who complain, why should I pay more sales tax? Why should I pay more income tax to finance the overspending of school districts who are not frugal? And I think that's the best argument to be made of all for this. If a school district has incurred a lot of debt on its own and they've been reckless with their debt, then it's up to them to pay for that debt. Why burden all the taxpayers of Pennsylvania with that debt?
Districts, I get you, Dave.
So it stays with the districts that incurred the debt in the first place.
Cool, thanks.